Good morning everyone and welcome to the StreetGames Conference 2021. It's fantastic to have everyone gathered here today with us, despite us not being in the same physical space together. My name's Kaci.
And I'm Becca, and we are from Dance Action Zone, Leeds, in Leeds itself, and we are known for DAZL for short. We deliver dance and physical activity sessions to young people from some of the most disadvantaged backgrounds in our city, and as participants, volunteers and now casual staff members of DAZL, we've seen the incredible difference this can make to young people and their communities.
So, StreetGames is a charity and is passionate about physical activity. We thought it would be great to start things off with a wake-up shake-up. Don't worry, if you don't have a lot of space, this can be done stood up or sitting down. It's only going to be a bit of a march, but don't worry, have fun. It's only going to be roughly about a minute to a minute and 30.
If you are going to be standing up, please make sure you're suitably dressed on your bottom half, as we know what these video calls can be like.
So if everyone want to stand up, or you can follow Becca sitting down. We're going to start with a small little march. You ready? Raise your hands up. Okay. Step out, we're going to roll the shoulders. Big circles out. Yes. Let's do his heads. Side, forward, side, forward, repeat. Let's do a circle, head. Other side. Raise down. Back down, last time. Arms to the middle. Across our bodies, and let's give it a little pull. Other side. Take it out. We're going to do elbow and we're going to hold. Other side. Well done. And then we're going to shake it all out. Shake shoulders. I hope you're a little bit awake now. Thank you for joining in. So we've been part of StreetGames Network in Yorkshire for a few years now, and we are looking forward to the next couple of weeks as we explore the vital role that our doorstep sport can continue to play in the lives of young people as we move out of the pandemic.
We are honoured to have been asked to host the opening plenary for this year's conference, and we're very excited to be introducing our speakers in a couple of moments. But first, a little bit about us.
So my journey to sport is quite a long one. I started dancing when I was roughly about 6 and 7 years old, and since then my passion for it has just grown majorly. Through DAZL, I have gone through mechanics in Wakefield to college, and there I have just recently finished my H&D diploma. But unfortunately, I am going to be taking a year out due to some bad news. But I couldn't have done it nowhere near if I didn't have the support around me, such as the teachers, the directors, other dancers, other performers. It's been my rock.
So my journey is pretty similar to Kaci's. I started out dancing when I was 9 or 10 years old, and I've been dancing ever since. I did recently take a break out of probably 2 to 3 years just to concentrate on my job, basically. But I have now got back into teaching at DAZL, and I am just finished complete my first year at Wakefield College doing my H&D diploma.
Before we get started, there is some housekeeping rules. Please keep yourselves on mute during the keynote session unless you're making a contribution. Nobody needs to hear your dog like you can all hear mine. Sorry about that. Or any homes with the hammer in the background.
So as you know, StreetGames is a network organisation, and we exist for you, our locally trusted organisations and key stakeholders. So this conference is for you, and we therefore want to interact with you guys. We have planned the content over the next fortnight so that networking with like-minded people and organisations remains a key feature of our conference. So please use the various functions on here whenever you're invited to do so, conversations in breakout rooms, chat boxes, whiteboards during any webinars and so on.
And please don't forget to engage with us on social media, particularly Twitter, using hashtag. You can see on your screens right now, it's hashtag Power of Place, sharing your key insights and takeaways from this conference. Over the next couple of weeks, through our virtual conference, Street Games are going to be bringing you a number of important and engaging topics relating to doorstep sport. Through a variety of keynote speeches, workshops and conversations, we are delighted to have secured so many fantastic guests and presenters and facilitators, including experts representing key stakeholders from the areas of sport, poverty and young people.
We're also going to be talking about sandwiches over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll leave Mark Lawrie to explain what that's got to do with the new Street Game strategy, but we thought it would be a nice topic just to get people interacting a little bit with. So please type in the chat what your favourite sandwich is.
We will give a shout out to the most interesting sandwich fillings that appear in the chat. You've got 60 seconds, go. Just waiting for some sandwich fillers. Ooh. So we've got I've just seen cheese and marmalade.
Oh no, I don't think that's a good combo.
No.
For me.
Tuna. You can't beat a tuna sandwich.
Tuna and cheese all the way for me.
What's your favourite sandwich, Becca?
Tuna and cheese. I absolutely love it. With a bit of mayo.
Not for me.
What's yours?
I'm plain and simple bacon.
No sauce?
Nope, no touching.
That's going to be dry as always, that.
No, can't have things touching.
Oh, there's some absolute beauties appearing in this chat. Look at that one.
Cheese, coleslaw and crisp.
That's a weird combo.
Chutney.
Oh, cheese and chutney. So thanks everyone for interacting in that little exercise. So we now have the privilege of introducing you to Tim Hollingsworth, Chief Executive of Sport England. Great to have you with us, Tim. Thank you for joining us. Please, could you reveal what your favourite sandwich is?
Good morning, Becca. Good morning, Kaci. Good morning, everyone. Undoubtedly, it is the great Marmite and cucumber sandwich.
Ooh.
I absolutely recommend it to anyone. Ideally, when I was younger, on some soft white bread, but I try and have it a bit more wholemeal these days. Yeah, try it. If you don't like your combinations, though, Kaci, I'm not sure you're going to go for that one.
No, I don't
anyway,
like
thank you very much indeed for asking me to kick off this morning and, talking about some of my favourite subjects, sport and activity, young people and sandwiches. You can't really go wrong. And thank you for the wake up exercise as well, which on a Monday morning was particularly welcome. I've just got 10 minutes, I know, to try and set the scene a little bit from a Sport England perspective. And I was delighted to be asked to speak at this conference this morning. I wanted to for a couple of reasons, really. One, because I'd like to take the opportunity, and always it's a good one, to thank Street Games for everything that you do, and everyone, all the local trusted organisations and all the people that work with and through Street Games. Because I know, and I'm going to speak for a few minutes about how significant that work is, and it's never been more important. So it's always a chance for me to say thank you to Street Games. They're great partners for us at Sport England, Mark and the team doing a really great job through this past year in particular. And also there's a collaboration there that's been illustrated really well in the work that we've sought to do ourselves in responding to COVID, but also recognizing that what COVID has done more profoundly than anything, apart from affect people's individual health and well-being, is shine a real light on where some of the inequalities that have existed for quite a long time are actually that they've got worse, and that really we've got to structurally change some things if we're really going to make a difference and reinvent better, come out of this better in the long term. An example of that, for that collaboration for me, I'm really proud of one of the programs that we've run specifically through Sport England. We put money early on into community support funds and helping clubs and community groups across the country. But I think we realized that we weren't getting that money necessarily to those who needed it most. And so we set up initially a 20 million, now a 40 million fund, the Tackling Inequalities Fund, which is directly appreciating the fact that if our money is going to reach the people that need it most, those people in perhaps the most deprived communities, those least able to understand how to access the funding that an organisation like Sport England can provide, then we need to work through others that can help them. And that's where organisations like Street Games come in. So the Tackling Inequalities Fund, rather than us taking submissions directly, we've worked with now around 70 organisations that we know, that we work with, who are trusted, who work at a national level. And they, in turn, have been able to distribute the funding out to organisations on the ground who they work with, who they know. And in turn, many of you, I'm sure, on this call will appreciate that. And the reason I highlight that is because it struck me that over 80% of the organisations who have benefited from our Tackling Inequalities Fund so far have never had any money from Sport England or public funding before. So it shows the gap still that we have to fill as an organisation and the way that we can work differently to do that. The Tackling Inequalities Fund also points the way, I think, to some of the way we need to think and work differently in the future, particularly looking at the conference that we're sort of with today and the work that's going on over the next fortnight. You know, thinking about the power of place and stronger communities and brighter futures for our young people through doorstep sport. And I'm really interested, really, just in spending my time in reflecting on precisely that. The pandemic's impact, you know, when it comes to thinking about community as well, just demonstrated how, you know, in some cases, there was a real benefit to people's lives. They had the time and the space perhaps to prioritize activity informally, walking, running, cycling, going and, you know, using our open spaces. But where that wasn't possible, or indeed where the local environment didn't necessarily make that an easy option for people, you know, we realized that actually we have to do things differently and we have to work harder if we're still going to make the opportunity to be active one for them, and especially for our children and young people where we're looking today. Just really understanding that, and the data's there to show us that the impact on our children and our young people has not only been fairly significant across the board, but it's profoundly shown the inequalities that exist. Tackling those inequalities, for those of you not familiar with our new strategy, Uniting the Movement, we published it in January. We have spent a long time thinking about what we want to do as a result of that strategy, and now we're in the process of thinking how we're going to do it. But at the heart of our mission is recognizing the need to unashamedly focus on and prioritize the tackling of those stubborn inequalities. And really, we see that through the lens of 5 big issues that we know we need to focus our time, attention, and money on. And each one of them relates very much to how you see the role that you're all looking to play. One of them is quite unequivocally a COVID response is going to take a pandemic related response over the next decade, I think, not just over the next 10 weeks or 10 months. But that recover and reinvent priority for us is very much around how we think about not just keeping the opportunities alive right now, but also how we work to change things for the better in the future. We want to align that very much with public health, with the understanding that activity in particular can play a much more embedded and perhaps positive role than it currently does in the solutions that we try and find to people's public health, and mental and physical health and well-being. Definitely that we want to think about the active environment in which people are living. You know, how can we make it better and easier for people to build activity into their everyday lives, whether that's the sports halls and the facilities and the pitches and the parks, or whether it's more informal spaces in our local communities that we can use. And then 2 that particularly relate to today. So 1, unequivocally recognizing the need for us to prioritize children and young people and understand that we really do need to not only make sure that in school and out of school, the offer is there that can make it as inclusive and accessible and enjoyable for our young people as possible, but also out of school, we're thinking about ways in which they can continue to be active in their local communities. And that sense of stronger community is the 5th of our 5 big issues, that understanding that the connection that sport can bring into people's lives at a local level, the way that it can actually build that sort of sense of society, of integration, of community, but also give purpose to a place and actually let people feel that they're connected to the environment in which they live. So thinking about those elements, and particularly thinking about those last 2, got me on to what I thought would be useful for me to say today. I've done enough of these things over Zoom or whatever we're on today. We're on something called Webinar Jam today. It's a new one to me. But, you know, recognizing what would be useful for me to do, not necessarily to do a great slideshow or some sort of stock presentation of uniting the movement, but just to give you 3 quick thoughts from me about how I think what we're trying to do at Sport England relates to what you're all trying to do on a day-to-day basis, and particularly thinking about the power of place, which is the sort of topic that we're focused on. And in doing that, I focus my thinking less on what we're doing, because in some ways the new strategy, Uniting the Movement, is just an evolution of that from our previous practice, and rather more focused on how. I think the revolution in our new strategy is in the how we operate rather than what we're seeking to do. We want to try and work differently. We've learned an awful lot in the last few years from 12 local delivery pilots that we've run across the country, a really important step change in the way of working for Sport England, thinking very much about, you know, how we can adopt some of the principles that I know very familiar to many of you around asset-based community development, about thinking about, you know, local delivery and working in a place. And I think one of the only thing that really characterizes the 12 pilots, because we wanted to make them very different in scale and approach and geography and various other factors, the one unifying force for them all was we chose areas which were defined perhaps by the sort of social and economic circumstances in that community, where low-income families in particular were situated, and therefore where we could learn the most about what we needed to do. So just to give my quick 2 pennies worth over the next couple of minutes, I've got 3 powers of my own that I think we've focused on that can play all to the power of place. The first one I thought was the power of listening. We've been very good, I think, historically at Sport England in telling people what we think. I think we've been less good at listening to what people actually want to tell us. And I think we've learned, not just through the local pilots, but particularly through the pilots, about how to do some of that better and understand the challenges that are faced by people in a place. And working with and not doing to communities has been a fundamental shift in balance for us that I think is starting to embed in all our work, and giving people a role and a voice in those decisions. And I think particularly, again, and it's just, you know, I will spend much of my time now listening to Kaci and Becca as well, but just the role of young people, and particularly listening to young people. I wonder if that youth voice genuinely is heard enough in the way that we organize ourselves and the way that we seek to deliver our work. It's very easy, I think, to assume that we know what our young people are thinking and what our young people want. And actually, I know that the biggest challenge perhaps that we face is to make what we've always considered to be sport and the role that activity can play in our lives relevant to a generation who think and behave differently and whose life experience is very differently, and for whom the role of technology is so profound and fundamental in their lives that we've got to understand that much better. So listening to that youth voice for me and making that sort of sense of local opportunity a reality is going to be really key. So we have the power of listening. I think we then also have the power of collaborating and the power of together. I'm really quite proud of the fact that we've started to not only deliver against organisational values, of which collaboration is one. We want to be a collaborative organisation, but also that we're starting to have our conversations around the nature of collaboration on almost, you know, an hourly basis. In other words, I think we're all trying to understand at Sport England and with many of our partners that it's actually how we work together that will make the difference, that we can't do this on our own. Certainly, I don't think Sport England can do it on our own. Relative to many organisations, you know, we have resources and capacity that mean we can achieve a lot, but we absolutely can't shift everything that we're seeking to move on our own, and we need to have that power of collaboration and good collaboration. And I would see the role that Street Games play here as a really good example. Good collaboration doesn't always just mean agreeing with each other. It means understanding what we can find mutually together that we can do, and then finding the best route to it, having a shared outcome rather than obsessing about a particular targeted output, for me, is the most important part of it. And we've seen that again at a national level in quite a lot of the programs we're trying to run now, the Tackling Inequalities Fund being an obvious one, but also thinking locally, again, working in our pilot areas and with other parts of the country, and understanding that sometimes it'll be our collaboration with the local authority, it'll be our collaboration with public health, it'll be our collaboration with GPs in the local area that can actually start to shift the balance and change the way that sport and activity is delivered, not only thinking about the lens of how traditionally it's been delivered over the last decades, you know, in that place. And so thinking about the power of collaboration is key. But good collaboration only happens when you have trust. And therefore, I think for me, the most important power of all is the power of leadership. And that's really one that I would want to leave with everyone on this call today, is how collectively we show the leadership to actually genuinely understand the role that sport and activity can play in a place, and understand that the best work happens when there is trust between those leaders and a high level of the ability to understand that it is the outcome that we're mutually seeking that matters. And I think we've seen again that that's starting to really, when it's working in place, it can be very powerful. The only example I thought would be relevant to give here of many across the local delivery pilots for me, for example, would be in Bradford, where we have a very specific focus on children and young people. The Born in Bradford program there is a really significant piece of research that's come out, you know, is now aligned very closely with the local delivery pilot that we're running. Because actually what that's seeking to do is get a longitudinal sense of what happens to the young people in that community in terms of their physical activity, their playing of sport, the role of sport in their community, and how it actually can help to drive physical, mental well-being and social integration. And I think the pilot work there, the way that Bradford has set up its work in the community to be solely and wholly focused around children and young people, is a really good example of leadership and understanding the impact that it can make. And it's already started to make some quite important changes. There's now a framework for delivery in Bradford, for example, called the Creating Active Schools framework. And really think that there's some real pioneering schools in Bradford that are starting to think about and do things very differently to try and help all their young people to have activity as part of their everyday lives. So I think in conclusion, I didn't want to take more than my allotted time. I hope that's about right. I can see Becca and Kaci have come back up on my screen, which suggests they probably want me to stop. But, you know, a sort of brief insight into where our strategy is taking us at Sport England, where Uniting the Movement genuinely sees it can play a part, our focus on our children and young people and on connecting communities as two of our 5 big issues. And mostly how, as we start to see the true impact of this pandemic on our individual health and well-being and on the communities in which we all live, that it's never been more important, I think, to work together to provide a more effective response. And that power of listening, that power of collaborating, and that power of leadership, I think, are 3 ways that I've tried to collect what is ultimately the power of place into our thinking today. And I really hope that you continue to have this conversation with sandwiches at their heart over the course of the next 2 weeks to really understand more about how we can work better together still to make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. That was really inspiring to hear. It's great to know that we have so many passionate organisations dedicated to using sport to transform lives in communities just like ours.
But next, we're going to have Alison Garnham, who is the CEO of the Child Poverty Action Group. So please give her a very warm Street Games welcome, but not before we ask the all-important question. What's your favourite sandwich, Alison?
My favourite sandwich? Oh, God. Chicken and stuffing.
Oh, I like that one. That one is a good shout. That is a go-to.
Not for me.
No good for veggies.
Yeah.
How do I move them on? Sorry. Ah, here we go. Got it. Right. Thank you very much. Sorry about that slight hiatus. So I'm going to talk this morning about tackling child poverty, and I think for you this is a kind of a background to the work that you're doing and being aware of what a lot of children and young people are facing. What do we mean by child poverty? Well, we think that it's when an individual family hasn't got the resources they need to have the diet, be able to participate in activities, have the living conditions and amenities that they need, or that are customary in the society that they live in. So, or at least widely encouraged and approved. And then you go about it looking for stats that kind of broadly represent that. And the one that's most commonly used is this one you can see on the left, which is using 60% of median income after housing costs as a proxy for how many people fall below that line. So we're looking deliberately at income poverty because we think we know from sound evidence that it's low income that leads to the poor outcomes that poor children face. So I'm asking a question here, but you won't have time to answer it. So what percentage of children in the UK are living in poverty? Is it 15, 25 or 31%? Couple of seconds to think about it, and well, the answer is 31%. So that's nearly a third of all children across the UK. That's about 4.3 million children and young people. So it's quite shockingly large figure. If you want to find out where the levels are for the area that you live in, you can go to this link here, which takes you to the End Child Poverty website, which is a campaign that we host. And it can give you the rates of child poverty for every parliamentary constituency and local authority. So that ought to be helpful in your campaigning. But to cut a long story short, we know there's 4.3 million children in poverty by this measure. It's up by about 700,000 since 2012. So it's been growing rapidly in the last few years. The fastest growth has been in the northeast on the latest statistics, where it's grown by a third. But normally the highest rates are in London and Birmingham. This is what the statistics will look like when you find them. So these are the local authorities that have had the highest increases over the last 5 years. So it's with Newcastle upon Tyne at the top, and you'll see there's lots of northeastern local authorities there with Leeds, Manchester and places sort of creeping in lower down. If you look at which constituencies in the UK have the highest rates of child poverty, they're mostly in London and Birmingham. So Bethnal Green, Hackney, Birmingham, Ladywood and so on. And in those areas, you'll notice that it's more than 50%, more than half of the children who live in those constituencies are living in poverty, which is really shocking. How many children, these children that we're talking about, do you think live with someone who's working? 24%, 55%, 75%? Well, you'll be shocked to know it's actually 75%. So 3/4 of children who are living in poverty by this definition actually live with a parent who's in work. So they're living with parents who are in very low paid work usually, and different groups are more likely to experience poverty. So you'll see that Black and minority ethnic groups are more likely to be in poverty, children in lone parent families, children of carers, and disabled children or who have disabled parents. And all of these things add up to kind of quite a burden for children and young people, because all of these, for they're an individual child, all of these things are happening at the same time. They might have problems with their immigration status that affects them, discrimination, poor housing, no place to play, poverty, all happening at the same time, as well as the kind of embarrassment that goes with not being able to have the same as other kids have. Often people use this measure in schools of how many children are poor. They look at how many children get free school meals, but it's worth knowing that 2 out of 5 school children in the UK who live below the poverty line don't actually qualify for free school meals. So it's not a great indicator because it misses a lot of kids out. So yeah, what's poverty like? It's like you're squeezed from every direction, low paid work, high cost of living, and just lots of stress and hassle. So what's been happening to child poverty over the years, you'll see from this chart, which starts like in 1961, that it was pretty flat through the 60s and 70s and then rose dramatically across the 1980s and then started to fall from the mid-1990s onwards when child benefit was rescued by John Major, actually. And then there was a formal child poverty strategy, which actually resulted in child poverty falling. But now we're in a period where child poverty is rising rapidly again. And that's because in the last 10 years, we've seen huge cuts to social security, over 50 separate cuts. And this year, we entered this year before the pandemic, with the government planning to spend 36 billion a year less on social security in 2021 than they were doing back in 2010. So it's hardly surprising that we're seeing the impact of that. And this is a chart from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which shows you the rollout of the cuts, so how much has been taken out of social security. You'll see on the bottom axis shows you the year when these things happen, and you see that the rise in the cuts started from about 2012-13 onwards, and it rises to about 40 billion by 2022-23. So we're still facing a still more increase in these cuts in future. And you'll also notice if you look at the growth in use of food banks, that the growth in food banks also started 2013-14 onwards. You see the rapid rise in food bank use there, including by children. And I think it's not unreasonable to think that there's a relationship between that rapid rollout of those cuts and the growth in use of food banks. So why is it rising? Low wages primarily, high costs like housing costs and childcare costs, the massive cuts, so that, for example, child benefit, which is specifically earmarked for the cost of children, it will have lost 23% of its value by 2020 compared to where it was in 2010. So it's now worth half of what it was when it was introduced in 1979. And of course, in 2016, the government abolished the Child Poverty Act. That was the legislation that was intending to see child poverty reduce. And of course, that's now gone. So again, no focus anymore on getting child poverty down. Some of the cuts were particularly to children and families, and you'll see that if you even look at just the cuts to universal credit, which was, of course, a new benefit from 2013 onwards, but it's been rolling out cuts. So single parents, you'll see they're losing over £2,000 a year, couples losing nearly £1,000 a year through just the cuts to universal credit. So it's no surprise that people are struggling when they're living on it. And a family with 3 children loses even more. And what we're seeing at the moment is that it's particularly larger families with 3 or more children where child poverty is now rising the most rapidly. And why does it matter? Because we know there's mountains of evidence in the UK that children who grow up in poverty do much worse in terms of their cognitive, physical and mental health. They're much more likely to do less well at school, to have illnesses like asthma and bronchitis, and more likely to have lower life satisfaction, so low self-esteem. And that has big implications for families. And we've seen through the COVID lockdown, job losses and sharp drops in income. So the choppy seas are getting choppier, and even people who were once secure are now in difficulty. We reckon another 200,000 children are likely to fall into poverty as a result of the pandemic. And this leads to a divide, really, an education divide, a health divide, a well-being divide, and it costs us a fortune. In order to respond to poverty, it costs something like 29 billion a year, and that's probably much higher now, more like 35 billion, which is the services that's needed and the loss of earnings that's needed to respond when so many people live in poverty. And that just represents just how those costs are made up there. So at local level, obviously we need local authorities to be taking as much action as they can. Oops, everything's dashing ahead. What's happening here? So there's lots of things local authorities can do. offer advice to make sure people get all the benefits they're entitled to, have generous local welfare assistance scheme, support parents to get jobs, high quality childcare, children's centres, extended schools is an important one, so that kids get access to enriching activities and holiday activities, and which allows their parents to work, expanding free school meals and providing mental health services, and unlocking sports facilities and community assets to be available to everyone. At school, kids face a lot of costs. So trips, meals, uniforms, you know what many of those things are. We did some big surveys with over 3,000 parents and children in the lockdown, and about 40% of them said they were still missing essential resources for school. Most of them were worried about money and had had to buy devices to be able to do home learning. So it's not been a very easy time for everybody. Lots of evidence there about how people are struggling. And here's just a list of some of the things that children find are a barrier to doing what they want to do at school. And it makes kids feel bad. So lots of kids feel that they're noticeable to their friends. Pressure on having the right shoes and bags, embarrassment of saying you don't have enough money, and so on. So lots of quotes here from the children that we've been talking to. And lots of suggestions as well. Can't we offer one free activity at all school events? Can't we, not assume people's financial situations? Can't we just, chuck it in a bucket donations rather than asking kids for specific amounts of money that they can't afford? So our project that we've been doing in schools is called The Cost of the School Day. And that's where all these ideas and suggestions are coming from, where it's children and teachers together that are working out what the answers to all these things are, and to try and prevent kids from facing these costs. So why do consultation with people like we've been doing in schools? The first one is it's often too embarrassing to talk about unless you actually deliberately address the issues. And also we might be prioritising the wrong things unless we actually ask people what they want you to take action on. So lots of things to consider when working in communities. Financial barriers will affect whether children and young people can participate at all. Poverty is often hidden, and even if you're looking at poverty data, it won't always tell you who it is you're talking about. More families are struggling now, and raising awareness of poverty, that people are struggling, will benefit everybody. So asking and not assuming is really important. So what needs to happen next? There's a lot of reform that's needed to kind of stop all this growth of poverty. There's lots of things need to happen. This list here is all about the social security system. We saw in the pandemic that universal credit wasn't enough. Statutory sick pay wasn't enough to prevent people working even though they were ill. Our job seekers allowance is the lowest level ever as a proportion of average weekly earnings, about 14% of earnings before they put £20 on it. We have the least generous support in the OECD for single people, and the third least generous for families with children. And 43% of people on universal credit are food insecure in the latest poverty stats. So there's a powerful case for doing something about all of this. And we know that when you spend money on low-income families, it's all spent in the local economy, because low-income people have to spend all their money. And that's a much better investment in recovery than giving money to the better off, for example, through tax cuts. So we're arguing to retain the £20 in universal credit, to increase children's benefits. In fact, if you increase child benefit by £10, it reduces child poverty by 5%, compared to only 2% for the £20 increase. And we'd like to see free school meals extended to all children on universal credit. And ultimately, what we need is a plan to end child poverty. We used to have one here. In fact, we showed the world that it was possible to reduce child poverty with our own child poverty strategy, and lots of other countries have taken it up. Joe Biden in the United States is now following a very similar plan by introducing increased child tax credits in America. in Canada, New Zealand, Ireland, and Scotland, of course. There are child poverty reduction targets as part of a wider plan. In New Zealand, it's part of a child and family wellbeing strategy. We don't mind what you call it, as long as as long as governments take on this kind of strategy. In New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister there, wants New Zealand to be the best place in the world for children and young people to grow up. And I think we should have a similar ambition here. And that's the end. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Alison. That was a challenging and encouraging presentation, and I'm pretty sure that we can all relate to everything you've said under the circumstances we've seen in our local communities.
Yeah, thank you.
So, StreetGames is blessed with a huge presence in Wales, with some fantastic locally trusted organisations leading our work. So, to start off with, give us a wave if you're from Wales. I know I am. So I myself am part Welsh due to my dad's side of the family, who live in Llandudno and Penwa. So it's great to have you all here with us. We're now going to hear from a representative of one of those LTOs county in the community in Newport. Please welcome Leigh and Jenkins, who is going to share some experience of how they have been using sport to make a positive impact on their local community in South Wales.
Morning, Liam. How are you?
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on today. I'm just going to try and get my slides up a second. Right. We're in. So, like I said, thanks for having me on. I'm Liam Jenkins from County in the Community. We're the charity arm of Newport County AFC, the football club. So we've had a decent couple of years, to be fair. We've had some good runs and some good days out. I'm just going to cram in or try and have a quick overview of the way we've worked and sort of feel we've had as a charity on people of all ages, really, but specifically focusing on young people and the stuff we do out in different areas with our community provision. So the decision was made quite early on, really. When it was first thought of or first come around the Covid-19, that County in the Community would cease all delivery for the safety of staff and for the safety of participants and other people involved. But I think the key thing that come from it was our staff wouldn't be furloughed. So I personally didn't go on furlough, along with 7 or 8 other members of the team, because we felt that we could have a stronger impact with the people we engage compared to just going on furlough, because we felt like they would still need us. There was still a way we could impact. There was still a way we could make a difference to the lives of the people we would engage in normal times. And we've just had an annual report made, to be fair, and it was called the Year of Challenge. So moving on a touch, throughout that year, our community provision we deliver is Premier League kicks funded through the charitable fund. We also have a small pot of funding through the PCC that supports that. And in partnership with StreetGames, we deliver Fit and Fed, which is really taking off at the moment. We deliver doorstep sport, and we've previously delivered on the Healthy and Active project, which has proved successful. From the start of the pandemic, probably quite suitable, really, going from the first presentation from Tim. We asked the young people, so the young people who would usually come to a session, whether that be in Orway, whether it be in Barracks Wood, whether it be in Ringland, so to speak, some of the communities we deliver, we asked them, would they be interested in still engaging? Obviously, from tight restrictions at the start, being stuck at home, not really leaving the house, not being able to go to school, we felt we could still offer something to keep them engaged, keep them active, and sort of keep their minds ticking over, not letting them get down, as so many people could have got caught up with right at the start of the pandemic. And what come from that, they said they would like Zoom calls. So on a weekly basis, we jumped on Zoom with the young people, bit of a question and answer, bit of a bit of a quiz and a catch up really. How are you doing? How things are going? What can we do for you? Because we're still here to provide you opportunities. What can we do while we can't see you face to face? Lucky enough, we had the use of Newport County. So a couple of times we had some first team players jump on the Zoom and chat to the young people and sort of give them some pointers of what they're doing to keep active, how they're doing certain things, and also how they can keep their minds busy and keep moving forward, really. We use social media challenges quite a lot. We have a decent following, especially on Instagram with the young people. So staff, as well as luckily enough, a few players set some challenges for the young people to do. And they sort of delivered, sort of participated in their garden and sent in videos, whether they were doing kick-ups, whether it was a bin shot, which was quite popular, and sort of things along those lines for participating. Then they'd be sort of delivered a bag, whether it be the tennis rackets that were given to us through StreetGames. A lot of young people received them, whether it was a football, some signed merchandise. They were sort of rewarded for taking part in the stuff we were putting out, which was nice to see. As well as the use of the players, we were lucky enough to have some guests from the PLCF. Down at the bottom left, myself in the top corner, and Mo delivers on kicks with me. We've got a participant, Ellie, in the bottom right, who's been great with us and recently started volunteering. She spoke to Rebecca Welch, you can see in the bottom left corner, who's recently the highest ranked women referee across the Football League, and actually refereed her first Football League game towards the end of the season. That was great for Ellie, who's someone to aspire to work in sport or play in the game. That was great for her to go on and sort of see where Rebecca's at, what did she do, how did she get to where she was, and basically the sharing of probably where Rebecca was years ago to where Ellie is now. That was a great thing that came out of it for us, the opportunity to be able to offer young people these certain things. We worked to deliver a FIFA competition. That was another thing that come from the young people, a little bit of feedback. They're all on their consoles constantly. And it was a bit strange, really. At the sessions, we're telling them not to sit behind their consoles too often, compared to the pandemic, where it was a way we could engage them. So there would be a couple of nights a week facilitated through us where young people could play in a bit more of a structured tournament compared to what they usually play in, which was great. Another participant at the bottom, you can see it's quite a small photo, comes to our weekly kicks and doorstep sport provision, created that banner for the NHS, and is still to this day up on the wall outside his house where he lives. And we got like a put together for that from the players, being a massive Newport County fan. Myself again in the middle on the top. We work to deliver things to the young people to their houses. So whether that be sports equipment or food, we felt as a charity we were in a position to sort of serve the young people and their families now more than ever, because the pandemic has been a time where a bad time really for a lot of people, not being able to get out, whether they can go out and get shopping, whether they don't have the funds to go and get the shopping, and also lack of equipment to take part in certain things at home. So it was quite regular actually, working with the local Tesco store, and you can see in the bottom right the local fruit and veg shop. We received numerous donations and managed to support X amount of families that we would normally be engaging with, which was great and really rewarding for us. Moving from the pandemic, obviously it's not over now, but we look like we're moving in the right direction. We've managed to create or sustain partnerships, funding, and our engagement with those young people who needed us so much when we couldn't see them face to face. I managed to come out the other end probably quite strong, in a good position. I've chosen these photos specifically because it was a session we didn't deliver prior to the pandemic at the start. We worked with Pobble, a local housing association, to deliver some Easter eggs and some flyers around the Easter time. And we delivered, we're in this community, Barrackswood and Harlequin. There was a lot of young while we were delivering the eggs, and it's a place we've never really been before. So we got chatting to the boys and girls while we were there. They've got a great space there, and there was basically nothing going on, mugger in that community. So we told the young people, as soon as it was safe to do so, we would come up and put on some free sessions, some free sport, which has moved on till now. We're in the community every Thursday, delivering kicks, delivering some free sports, mainly football, but the young people have had opportunities to play dodgeball and handball. And the bottom photo you can see in the centre is the local community group. They turn up every week with fruit and waters. So yeah, it might just look like a sport provision, but this is an evening of the week where the community are getting together. The parents are turning up and sort of having conversations with. It's a bit crazy, really. It's like a bit of a day out for everyone, but it's great to see. And that's our newest addition to our weekly delivery. But I like to think that we've got this across the board. Whatever program it may be, I like to think we sort of add the session, but moving on from what is just a weekly session, it's sort of like a family and friends approach. They are a group, they are together, and we are there to support them. So like I said, we've had many challenges, like all organisations have, really, but I like to think our staff have stuck together. And the biggest thing that has come from it, for me personally, with the community delivery that I'm overseeing and delivering on, is how much of an impact we actually do have with those young people, and how much they do see us as role models and trusted staff members, because they wanted to engage with us continuously throughout the lockdown. There wasn't enough we could put on for them, really, up until now, where we've continued to provide those opportunities. And I like to think our little slogan, enhance the lives of the young people, where we've returned now to normal delivery, and the same faces that we were seeing over a year ago, as soon as we're back at the sessions, we're seeing those people straight back and delivering. So we've learned a lot. We've carried on delivering, like I've said, which I've stressed, which has been great. And we've put a lot of hard work in. The partners that we've delivered with, you can see on the screen, on the yellow screen. So a massive thank you to those, including StreetGames, and the team in Wales, who are only ever a phone call or a cup of tea and a bacon roll away. And the two little partnerships we feel we gained community-wise during the pandemic. So it's been great. It's been tough, like I said, but I like to think we have sort of stuck in and done what the charity should be doing, what we feel we should be doing up until now. So thank you for the opportunity to talk. And I think I'm just at my time. I did see the girls pop up probably over 30 seconds ago. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Liam. It is so good to hear practical examples of how you've supported young people in Newport over the past 15 months. Staying in your beautiful country, we're now going to hear from Joe Nicholas, the Assistant Director of Sport Wales. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us. Have you got a favourite sandwich you'd like to reveal?
Oh, I was hoping you might ask me that question. So I think I'm a bit of a Christmas girl, actually, and I've gone for the turkey, cranberry and stuffing all the way for me.
Oh, I'm not a fan of turkey, but it does sound quite nice.
Although I was tempted by the crisp sandwich as well, so a little bit torn on that one.
Yeah, a good old crisp sandwich won't hurt.
I'm going to kick off. So firstly, I'd just like to echo some of Tim's words from the presentation at the start this morning. Thank you ever so much for inviting me this morning. Really feel privileged to be here, and to thank StreetGames for all their work. And this morning I'm just going to spend my 10 minutes giving you a bit of an overview of Sport Wales and the vision and our direction, and I really hope that you'll see just how important organisations like StreetGames are in achieving our vision. And it was really heartening to hear Liam talk about some of the real practical examples of where it's absolutely happening and making a difference in Wales. So thank you for sharing that. So we've been on quite a journey over the last few years in Wales, and I'm always really delighted to be able to kind of share our direction. We launched our vision in 2018, and I just want to highlight here it's a sector vision. This isn't Sport Wales's vision, and a lot of work was undertaken to ensure that the people of Wales had their voice and were able to input into what the vision for sport in Wales should look like. So absolutely sector vision. We think it's bold. The word that really jumps out to me is everyone, and that's our biggest challenge. This vision is setting out so that everybody can have that lifelong enjoyment of sport, and we know tackling inequalities is absolutely at the heart of that, because unless we are able to do that, then we're not going to be able to achieve our vision. So for us, a really bold vision. We absolutely recognise that Sport Wales cannot deliver that on its own, so it needs a united collective front. So we launched our vision, and this is a busy slide, so apologies, but I just want to draw your attention to something that we call is the 9 conditions. So there's some evidence to suggest that for people to have that lifelong enjoyment of sport, there's 9 things that need to be in place all at the same time. And I don't think it will be a surprise to you to hear them. There's motivation, the confidence, it's got to be a positive experience. There's got to be the opportunities and resources. People have got to know the opportunities are there. They've got to be able to value them, got to have the skills to be able to take part. We need inspiring people, just like Liam, leading those activities, and people have got to be able to access them. So I don't think that comes as any surprise, but absolutely those 9 things we recognise absolutely need to be in place for us to be able to then achieve that vision in Wales. Those activities, and people have got to be able to access them. That's a bit of feedback there. Just in terms of then Sport Wales, so that was a sector vision. So that's our end purpose. We want to affect the people of Wales. But Sport Wales, we then developed our own strategy. So this is our input. This is our contribution to achieving that wider vision. And our strategy talks about enabling sport in Wales to thrive. And with that, brought a real change in our approach. So we used to have a lot of KPIs. We used to set out, this is what we're going to achieve and this is how we're going to do it. But we're having a real fundamental shift in how we articulate our strategy. And what you'll see is some areas called strategic intent. So they're a direction, they're a travel, it's a way forward. We don't have KPIs in our strategy because we feel, one, they bring unintended consequences and we can't predict the future. So we have 6 areas of strategic intent, which are a direction for us. And our focus as an organisation is very much on trying something, reflecting on it, learning from it, and then moving it forward. And those areas you can see on the slide, being person-centred, giving everybody, every young person a great start, ensuring that everyone has the opportunity, bringing people together, showcasing the benefits, and as an organisation being a really highly valued organisation. And listening to Tim's presentation earlier this morning, they're very similar to some of the things, the approach that Sport England are also taking. I mentioned about that shift in approach. So I think Tim touched upon around this collaboration and working in true partnership. And we absolutely are setting out to working in true partnership and recognise, as he mentioned, that listening is at the heart of that and actually delivering against people's needs. With the partners that we support, our aim is to have greater levels of flexibility and accountability. So we call it helping partners to account as opposed to holding partners to account. And what we're trying to do is go through a process, and it is early days, of that shared discovery, working alongside partners to reflect, learn, and that continuous improvement. We now also have changed the way we measure progress. So we don't have KPIs in our strategy. We no longer ask our partners to set KPIs either. So again, what we're looking for is actually to see their journey of the learning that they're undertaking. We're changing the way we deliver local sport. So we're setting up regional sports partnerships. And our focus is very much on the needs of the participant, and that's really reflected in our vision. It's about the participant of Wales, and recognise we cannot do that without collaboration and really pulling together our resources. And if nothing else, over the last 12 months through COVID, it's really shown that actually we can do it as well. I want to touch upon how StreetGames fit into that vision for us, and StreetGames are a trusted partner in Sport Wales, and there's just two key facts to illustrate why StreetGames and organisations like StreetGames are so important. So the 42% there, pre-COVID, 42% of children from the most deprived households in Wales took part in activity 3 or more times a week, but 58% didn't. Post-COVID, 24%. So we've done a survey called CommsRes. So our CommsRes survey says that in higher socioeconomic levels, there doesn't appear to be too much difference in participation. However, in lower levels, there absolutely is. And 24% of people reported they'd done no physical activity in the previous week. And it's organisations like StreetGames that can really help us with our vision, because we recognise we need to get to the people where it really is going to make a difference. And StreetGames, with the local trusted organisations, with initiatives like Doors to Let Sport, can absolutely do that for us. And our change in approach is very much around getting to the people that we really, really need to tackle, which has been really hard in previous years. I know most people have touched upon COVID, so just to kind of reflect on what the last 12, 14, probably a bit more now, months has taught us. It's very much in tune with our strategy that we can't always plan for the long term. Really heartened, we should all be just so, recognise and be privileged that, when actually we went into lockdown, sport was the one thing that, daily exercise was the one thing that was prioritised. So that really sends a really powerful message about the importance that the government, that the country places on sport and physical activity. We know we have to be flexible and agile, and I think we've all shown that we can absolutely do that. We talk about this being a negative, but actually, is it an opportunity? Some organisations, some people have enabled this to thrive and see new opportunities, and we need to be encouraging that more and more and more. We know that collaboration is essential, but we absolutely recognise we still have challenges ahead, and we can see, and I know, I think it was Tim touched upon it earlier this morning, that the gap has widened between those that weren't doing activity before, or doing limited activity, and particularly in those disadvantaged groups, that the gap is absolutely widening. A few things I just wanted to leave you with, really, in terms of my last slide around what's on the horizon. How does the sports sector respond to it? So we've just commissioned some research, which we haven't fully shared the results yet, but around the future. What does the future look like? And it's not a prediction of the future. It's taking some of those key themes and looking at those emergent themes and what's coming out of them. And so I've just listed some of the things that, as a sports sector, we need to respond to. Climate change, I think it's a hot topic at the moment. We've heard lots about it. Hotter summers, more frequent droughts, more frequent flooding. How's the sports sector going to respond to that? The outdoors, COVID has led to more people wanting outdoor sport and exercise. Expert consumers, can we match the levels of service that are offered by Amazon? Locality, so people are increasingly now wanting local sport. Technology, that's been seen a massive increase since COVID. What should we prioritise? Is it online booking systems, experience applications, online coaching? Hybrid sports. So we've had this online presence for a long time. Bit of online fatigue is out there. Can we combine the online and the real-time sport? Apps like Zwift and things like that have done a huge amount to be able to address some of that. Aging, what can we offer an aging but healthy population? And data, do we have the right data protection and security protocols in place? So lots of things to consider for the sector as a whole, in terms of, particularly in Wales, being able for having an active nation and for everyone to have a lifelong enjoyment of sport. So thank you for listening. Hopefully that's been useful to give you a flavour of the direction of travel in Wales. And yeah, thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Jo. That is so helpful to see the national vision and strategy behind some of the great work that LTOs like county in the country, in the community in Wales.
So we have 2 more speakers to go, and they are both from Street Games, which is very exciting. Firstly, we'd like to introduce John Cove to share his views as the chair of Street Games, who will also do the honours of introducing our final keynote speaker for this morning's open plenary. Good morning, John. Thank you for having us. Just out of interest, what is your favourite sandwich?
Oh, it varies from day to day and from moment to moment, but I guess my favourite sandwich, if I could pick, I'm afraid, is roast beef and horseradish sauce.
Ooh, that's a combo I've not heard of before.
Available in your local stores.
Oh, might have to have a nosy. Might be a nice one.
Great. Well, thank you very much for introducing me, and thank you to all the speakers that have come and taken the time to address us all today. You can see that I'm actually in my office at Stadium MK, which is where I work, and so I live the power of sport every day, and I wanted to take the short time I have to say a number of things. The first is thank you to all of our locally trusted organisations, all those people working in the community who over the past year have actually shown and epitomised what it is that you do for your local communities, because of course it just goes beyond sport, but using sport as the hook. So all the work that people have done in the pandemic, from people making sure they're calling on their participants to look that they're all right, through to helping out deliver food, through to helping people get back on their feet, using your good offices and your experience in how communities work has been a vital piece of helping people in your communities get through this pandemic. So I want to say firstly a thank you for doing that over the past year. I also want to say thank you for now looking forward and thinking about how we can help our communities revitalise, regenerate and renew what we know that they can do and what they're capable of. You are vital in that endeavour. Your work in the communities, as I've already said, is very, very targeted and very, very effective. You've heard in some of the presentations today what people are hoping to do, where they're seeing the gaps are. And let me be in no doubt that you will be the ones that help those gaps be filled. So if you need any support, if you need any help from us, please make sure that you contact everybody around. Now, the other thing to say is we've used the time of the pandemic not only to look how we can support you better, but how we develop our strategic plan to help create the environment that then enable people to see the vital work that you do and how that can be supported. So over the next few months, and many of you have taken part in the development of the strategy, over the next few months we'll be finishing that off and actually launching it about the end of the summer. And then you'll be able to see and be able to participate in what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do will come as no surprise, but how we do it in this post-COVID world, how we support you properly, how we enable other people to see the support you need in order you can get to the most disadvantaged in your areas, we'll be putting a little bit more shape on that. So finally, a big thank you again to all of you, the delegates, for attending today, for all of our key speakers, and you've heard from both Sport England and Sport Wales about what their plans are for the future and how exciting that is for us at Sport, for Street Games, to actually participate that and help them deliver on their strategies. So thank you to all the keynote speakers as well. And now it's my privilege to introduce our Chief Executive, Mark Lawrie. Many of you will know him, of course. If you don't know him, Mark has been Assistant Chief Executive for a number of years and took on the role and mantle of Chief Executive last year, or earlier this year actually. So without further ado, it's my privilege, and as I say, I'm very proud to present Mark Lawrie, Chief Executive of StreetGames.
Thanks very much, John. Just need to check. I'm looking for the girls to give me the thumbs up that you can see my presentation. First of all, I can't see you on the screen, girls. Can you help me out here? Is it working?
Yeah, you are.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thanks, John. I just wanted to start by saying what an incredible privilege it is to work for StreetGames as an organisation. And I say that really carefully because the amazing thing about the team of people that work for StreetGames is they don't really need motivating. They bounce out of bed every morning determined to do things to improve the lives of young people who live in some of our poorest communities around the UK, and to support all of you who are the vital, locally trusted organisations in your neighbourhoods that make such a difference to the lives of children and young people. And I'm going to start, I know I wasn't given the chance to be told, but I'm going to start with my sandwiches, and I'm going to cheat Becky and Kaci. I'm going to have a summer sandwich and a winter sandwich. So my summer sandwich is definitely mixed cheese with mayonnaise and cucumber and lettuce. And then my winter sandwich is called a reindeer, which has turkey, stuffing, pigs in blankets and cranberry in it. I can't have too many of those because I'm already big enough. I don't need to eat any more from a winter perspective. But thank you to both of you for doing such a brilliant job this morning. It's the best start to a Monday morning I've had in a long time. The other thank you, just before I move on to what I want to talk about, another one for Hannah Crane and the conference team, including the team at Y Sports, who've put a huge amount of energy into getting this right. We've all been spending the last 16 months looking at screens like this, but actually making it seamless, making it work is really important. So thank you to those people. And to the previous speakers, and particularly to our colleagues from Sport England and Sport Wales. We would not be able to have done what we've done to support you as organisations and individuals over the past 16 months without the flexibility, the support and the thinking and listening that our funders have provided to us. That flexibility has just been absolutely crucial to the help that we've been able to give to all of our network during the pandemic. So thank you for that. Some of you might not have met me before, lucky you, but I just wanted to share a bit of my background. And before I share my background, I just want to thank one more person. Most of you that have come to StreetGames Conference over the past 15 years will have been used to Jane Ashworth, our founding chief exec, standing up and at the start of her presentation saying, right, you lot, 250 people, including chief execs of national organisations in the room. Jane actually retired, in inverted commas, at Christmas. And the way that she has left our organisation could not be in a stronger position. Now, we're really lucky because Jane's decided to stay and she's going to be one of our vice presidents. But I just want to say, from my own perspective, as someone who was there just about on day one, when there were 4 of us sat in a builder's office in Stockport back in 2007, thank you to Jane for everything she's done, not just for the organisation, but for hundreds of thousands of young people who grow up in deprived communities. And as we make the transition from Jane to me having more of an involvement in leading the organisation, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my background, because actually I think the way that we grow up and the things that we experience really shape our values and our purpose. And in the top left of this slide is the council house that my parents, my family, my brother and sister, they've lived in for nearly 50 years now. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And at that point, I didn't know that we didn't have much money. And I look back now, I can remember really clearly being stood in the butcher's, where you had to go in those days to get meat, and my mum saying £2 of mince, about £1 in money, and literally counting out pennies from her purse to make sure that we could have some dinner that night. Now, as a kid, you didn't really think about those kinds of things. And actually, what I was really fortunate to be was in an area where there was lots of open space. So I'm no great sports person, but the park down the road, the local recreation ground, it was Wembley, it was Lords, it was the Olympic Stadium. We played football, we picked up bits of wood and played cricket. We had races. And just down the road from me was what would now be called a pupil referral unit, which in those days was a behaviour school. And they actually had a tennis court within their grounds. And I'm probably one of the only people I know that used to break into a behaviour school so that I could go and have a game of tennis with my brother. But sport was so important, and having it there for no cost at all made such a difference to me growing up. And then as I got older, I decided that to start with in my career, I wanted to be a primary school teacher. And the picture on this slide at the bottom right here is of the school in Balsall Heath in Birmingham, where I did one of my teaching practices. And any of you that come from Birmingham will know that Balsall Heath is one of the poorest areas of the city. It's incredibly diverse, a really rich mix of different backgrounds, different languages spoken, but actually the majority of children in the school had virtually nothing. And I remember two things really clearly. I remember doing a science lesson with children where we had those cotton reels that you get that have the cotton wrapped around them and bits of string to weigh things, and just how fascinated some of these young people were, because no one had ever had the time to spend with them at home, just doing really, really simple things. And the second thing I remember that was absolutely magical was that this school was just down the road from Edgbaston. And even though it had no grass, it had nothing but a playground, Edgbaston, the county cricket club, used to come up and do cricket on the playground with the children. And to see the faces of those children after school playing cricket, and then to watch them go all the way to the final of the Warwickshire Schools Championship, just allowed them to experience success that meant their background, the money they had, just did not matter. So I've always believed in the power of sport to make children and young people's lives better. And we know that the past 12 months hasn't been easy for anyone. I was really interested to see Alison's quote on the bottom of one of her slides that talks about the fact that with COVID, we've all been in the same storm, but we haven't been in the same boat. And when you look at the impact of COVID in low-income areas, it is just so significant. There were already significant issues with poor mental health in deprived areas. It was 3 times higher before the pandemic. That situation is far worse now. As Alison said, free school meals are not the only measure of children not having very much, but the numbers of children on free school meals have gone up by over 300,000 in less than a year, based on the figures that were published last week. And 75% of the families that live in poverty, as Alison said, are working. And one of the reasons why the death rates has been double in some deprived areas is that people have been unable to stop working. In order to feed their family, they've had to take risks and go out and do those manual jobs very often that bring them into close contact with other people. And so people's willingness to look after their children, to make sure that they have food to eat, has cost some communities incredibly dear. And from a sporting perspective, sport has almost closed down in the past 16 months. The amount that's been lost in terms of the ability to open leisure centres, the chances for governing bodies to play sport, we know that there have been unequal reductions in sport and physical activity. And the recovery, as both Tim and Joe alluded to, is going to be really, really important, because one of the things that's been really positive in the past 16 months has been the way that sporting organisations have pulled together, and there's been far greater collaboration during the pandemic, focused in local communities. This is an absolutely transformational moment. However awful it's been, it is a moment not just to make things better, but to absolutely fundamentally change how sport delivers to communities where there is very little in terms of money, in terms of opportunities for work, and in terms of quality of life. And there are positives, because when you look at the third column around policy and strategy, it's so welcome for me that both Sport England and Sport Wales are absolutely focused on sport's role in tackling inequalities. Sport can't do it on its own. Sport is part of the picture, but it can certainly make the lives of young people so much better in their local areas. And there's a lot of talk at the moment about this phrase of levelling up. And what that does, whatever the government decide to publish in the autumn, it focuses on those areas of greatest need. And that is just so important. One of the positive outcomes of the pandemic, if there has been, is people's awareness of areas where there isn't much is far greater than it's ever been. And I was talking to Jackie Gedman, who is the Chief Executive of Kirklees Authority in West Yorkshire, a couple of weeks ago. And what she said to me was, we need to stop talking. We've been talking about poverty for far too many years. We need to get on and we need to do something. And that for us is why this focus on collaboration is just so important. The need to work with our colleagues in active partnerships, in organisations like Sported, to work with the other members of the Sport for Development Coalition, who all are focused on making the lives that people lead in local communities better through sport. And we know, for those of you who run local organisations, and it was brilliant to hear from Liam about some of the things that county and the community have been doing, we could have picked any one of hundreds of organisations in England and Wales that have done amazing work during the pandemic, because we know that all of you have been right in the front line of pandemic relief in your communities. And we know you've gone far, far beyond just delivering your usual sport and physical activity sessions. We also know that that agility that you've had for so many years to just find money, to find funding, to find support has really become very fragile in the last 12 months. With the number of income streams that have been lost through things like not being able to run after school activity, the fact that many of you have had to spend your reserves just to survive. But without the support of organisations like Sport England and Sport Wales, I'm not sure we would have got through this past year in some respects with the organisations in our network intact. And we know we're still on a journey with this, but the support through the emergency funding, through the Tackling Inequalities Fund that Tim mentioned, has just been vital to sustaining local organisations. And another benefit of the pandemic for us is that we've been able to talk to young people far more directly than perhaps we have done in the past. And young people have told us, whilst we've listened to them, that there is a pandemic within a pandemic. And we see it on the news all the time, but that poor mental health is one of the most challenging aspects of what's happened to young people in the past 12 months. And it doesn't go away quickly. It takes an awful lot of support and an awful lot of focus to ensure that young people can be supported to come back to better mental health. My own daughter, who is 17, has been through terrible suffering with her mental health in the last 2 years. And it's one of the hardest things to watch because, unlike a broken leg, you can't see it and you can't take her to the doctor and get her bandaged up and fix it. So us understanding the needs of young people around mental health and really working hard to support them is so important. And one of the great things that will support them are their friends. That's the thing that's made the biggest difference to my daughter. And we know from the listening to young people we've done that 81% of them are just desperate to be back at their doorstep sports sessions to see their friends. And so the topic that this conference covers, the power of place. One thing that's really surprised us about talking to young people is just how much they feel a greater sense of belonging in their community, how they feel their communities are more close-knit, how they feel like people are more friendly generally in their communities. So again, for all of the terrible challenges that we've been through in the last 16 months, there have been positives and there are things to build upon. So John alluded to the fact that we'll be publishing our new strategy at the end of the summer. And one of the things we've worked really hard on in talking to young people, in talking to yourselves as local organisations and our partners and stakeholders all around the country, is to really keep it simple. We want healthier, safer, more successful communities through sport. And that word sport is really important to us because we know that young people want and need sport. Being active is great. Being active keeps you alive. Being active, walking to the bus stop quickly, will keep your heart rate moving. But actually the benefits for young people from low income areas come through being involved in organised sport. And we also know that being involved in organised sport and physical activity transforms lives. And that's something that through the pandemic, in talking to young people we've worked with over the past 15 years, has become so clear to us. When they tell us about how being involved in their local organisation has set them on a course to a much better life than maybe they would have had. And so for StreetGames, the impact that we're trying to have is to positively change sport so that sport is open to young people in these communities where perhaps in the past it's been closed. It's to build on and strengthen local communities through bringing people together, through ensuring that positive activities are there to help reduce crime and antisocial behaviour, and to transform the lives of individuals who get involved in sport. And this is the first time we've ever had a specific ambition for young people, and this has come through all of those conversations. Because every young person, whichever community they're in, deserves to have somewhere where they feel safe, that's centred around them, and where they choose to go, not just to get active, but also to feel part of something and to develop as an individual. And we know for young people that them being heard, them feeling valued, and them being supported is just so important for their journeys. And where young people do want to play mainstream sport, where they do want to compete, where they do want to join a club, StreetGames wants every young person that's in that place to have the opportunity to play sport in the same way as any other young person. At the start of the conference title is the statement about brighter futures through doorstep sport. Now, Doorstep Sport, for some people, is a programme that we ran back in 2013. For others, it's a club that was funded by Sport Wales. But for StreetGames, Doorstep Sport is far more than that. It's a method, it's an approach, and it doesn't look the same in Cardiff as it does in Newcastle or Cornwall or Lambeth or Nottingham. It's about the 5 rights. It's about sport delivered at the right time for young people, in the place that suits their needs, in a style that makes them feel safe, not just in terms of community safety, but in terms of being psychologically safe, feeling like you belong and that it's delivered in a way that suits you. Often at a price that is free, because we understand from what Alison was saying just how little money many families have. And most crucially, by the right people. Those local people that make such a difference to young people's lives. And all of the things on this slide that Doorstep Sport can do, we are going to work really hard on in our new strategy to get very specific work for different age groups, how it can work for boys or for girls, how it can work for young people who live in poverty with disabilities or from ethnically diverse communities, because we've been doing this for 15 years now and it's more than a strap line. Doorstep Sport is a method. It's the way that we do things, because Doorstep Sport for StreetGames is at the beating heart of what we do. And whilst we'll do that with yourselves, we'll also look to use the ingredients of doorstep sport, and we'll work with governing bodies and we'll work with leisure providers, because they can deliver sport in a way that really meets the needs of the young people we're bothered about. And we won't stand still over the next 10 years. It will continue to develop to meet your changing needs as young people and to meet what the young people you work with need. So this for us is about climbing the mountain. It's about making sure that all young people from low income, underserved communities have the opportunity to engage in the right sporting offer for their needs. And here at last is the sandwich, heavily built by Becca and Kaci early on. This for us is about how we bring together all of the different strands of work that we deliver. So at the top of the sandwich is absolutely the sport and physical activity gap, and ensuring that young people in low income communities have access to doorstep sport, but recognising that that isn't all that affects their lives. Doorstep sport delivered in the right way can help young people and communities be healthier, safer, and more successful in all of the ways outlined within the slide. And then we focused on the holiday gap, because for all that there are genuine issues all year round for young people living in low income communities, we know that the holidays are a particular time of challenge. And so Fit and Fed and all of the work that we're doing in England and Wales around the holiday activities and food programme, and soon to be the Summer of Fun programme, are just crucial to making sure that children and young people have good, active holidays where they get fed and where they spend time with their friends. My final few points are about the power of people. People make change. Greta Thunberg, as a teenager, has caught the attention of the world around climate change. But somebody on the England game on Saturday, I think, called him the man of the year. I think that's a fair description for some of their power for such good, to shine a light on the issues that young people in the communities we're concerned about face. And then on the left of that slide, one of our LTO leaders, and this could have been any one of you. This is George Turner from Carney's Community in London. And George is there as a change maker for young people in his community every day of the week, rain or shine. Stable person who they can turn up, they can speak to, and they know will always support them exactly in the way that you all do. And all of the speakers, to a certain degree, have talked about this in one form or another. We could talk about 10-year strategies, but actually the truth is the young people who live in these communities need change tomorrow. They need change today. And the way that we get that change is that the people who work in these communities, all of you, all of us, have to find a shared purpose to make things better. And we have to trust each other and work in a way that can only lead to positive change for young people in the communities that we're concerned about. And we want, as Street Games, to be the people beside the people. The young people in the middle of this particular slide are some of the young volunteers that we first worked with back in 2007. So 15 years on nearly, these young people are now teachers, they're now leisure centre managers, they're involved in helping their communities, all because of the work that local organisations did to support them. Brendan, who's on the right of this slide, is a young man from Manchester who was homeless. Through the work that we did supporting him through his homeless hostel, he became someone who set up a homeless football tournament right across the city, when at the start of it all, he could barely get out of bed. And the person who's on the left of this slide is the reason that I'm here. This was the person, Melvin, who spent the time to invest in me when my dad was working 2 jobs just to keep things going. Melvin was the one who made sure that I had the opportunities to lead, that I had the opportunities to volunteer, and I had the opportunities to develop. And Street Games have been the people beside the people through the pandemic, and will continue to be the people beside the people as we go forward, helping all of you in whatever form you need to do the amazing work that you do every day in your communities. I think we all want to see a brighter future for our young people. Barack Obama's quote is absolutely right. There's many reasons why this is a challenge, but actually, if nothing in life that's worth anything is easy, then we can address all of this and make a difference together. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Mark. What an amazing way to conclude this morning's open plenary. And thanks for getting all the important street game sandwiches in there, Mark. It has helped a lot of people make sense of our random icebreaker. We're almost done. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You may have noticed I'm on my own now. Becca's had to leave for work. Street Games obviously hasn't paid us enough for our presenter duties. Just a reminder to keep interacting on Twitter with those conference with hashtag power of place. Thank you to those who have already been doing this. Our next session is around sport, poverty, and that means context of Covid-19. This begins at 11:30, so grab a coffee, grab a cup of tea, and we'll see you again soon. Enjoy the conference. Street Games Conference 2021. Thank you for having me.